nervous systems, like any part of humanity, has access to almost all the information of humanity.
At 3 a.m., while most of the world sleeps, a man refreshes his phone, watching rockets, factories, and markets breathe through numbers on a screen. One failure could erase billions. One tweet could shake global finance. One sleepless night could decide whether humanity reaches Mars or collapses under its own ambition. Tesla reshaped how the world moves. SpaceX turned science fiction into flight data. Yet behind the steel, code, and applause stands a man battling insomnia, crushing pressure, public ridicule, and emotional isolation. How much of a human soul must be sacrificed to carry the future of an entire species? And when history praises him, what will remain of the man himself? In the modern age, few names ignite imagination and controversy as violently as Elon Musk. To some, he is a visionary, an engineer-philosopher pulling humanity away from extinction. To others, he is reckless, erratic, and dangerously obsessed with speed over stability. But regardless of opinion, one fact is undeniable. Elon Musk stands at the crossroads of the future, where technology, power, and human fragility collide. Musk's companies do not merely sell products, they sell destiny. Electric cars were once niche experiments mocked by oil giants, until Tesla forced the world's largest automakers to rewrite their strategies. Reusable rockets were deemed economically impossible, until SpaceX landed boosters upright like steel giants bowing to gravity itself. Neural interfaces, planetary colonization, global satellite internet, ideas once reserved for novels now occupy boardrooms and government briefings. But behind these achievements lies a story far darker than balance sheets or launch footage suggest. Musk's life is a prolonged state of emergency. Weeks blur into months without rest. Sleep becomes a negotiable luxury. Stress is not an obstacle, it is the operating system. Former partners and employees describe cycles of brilliance followed by emotional implosion. Public interviews reveal laughter that barely masks exhaustion, humor edged with something closer to despair. While the world celebrates innovation, Musk lives inside a paradox. To save humanity, he must continually push himself toward personal collapse. He has admitted to weeks of sleeping on factory floors, surviving on caffeine and pressure. He has spoken openly about loneliness, about nights when the weight of responsibility becomes unbearable. Romantic relationships fracture under the gravitational pull of ambition. Family moments are postponed, rescheduled, or lost entirely to emergencies that never end. This is not the story of a man corrupted by excess, but of one consumed by purpose. Musk does not chase luxury, he chases survival. His fear is not failure in business, but extinction itself, of progress, of civilization, of the future. And that fear drives him harder than any external enemy ever could. So when headlines reduce him to tweets, scandals, or stock fluctuations, they miss the deeper truth. Elon Musk is not merely building companies. He is waging a personal war against time, physics, bureaucracy, and his own limits. The question is no longer whether he will change the world. The question is whether anyone can endure the cost of carrying such a vision and remain whole. Long before factories, rockets, and global scrutiny, there was a quiet, awkward boy growing up far from Silicon Valley's optimism. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon Musk entered a world that rewarded toughness and punished difference. He was small, bookish, and intensely inward, traits that made him a target. School corridors became arenas of cruelty. Beatings were frequent, some so severe they left him hospitalized. While other children learned belonging, Musk learned endurance. Silence became armor. Imagination became escape. His refuge was reading, an obsession so consuming it worried adults. He devoured encyclopedias, science fiction, physics, biographies, anything that hinted at systems larger than himself. In books, problems had rules. In equations, outcomes could be predicted. Reality, by contrast, felt chaotic and unsafe. This contrast seeded a lifelong pattern. When human relationships became painful or unpredictable, Musk retreated into systems he could understand, optimize, and control. Family life offered little relief. His parents' separation introduced instability early, and the emotional environment was complex, often harsh. Praise was scarce, expectations were not. The lesson absorbed was brutal and simple. Worth must be earned through achievement. Love was conditional. Approval followed results. This belief would later metastasize into a relentless drive, one that measured self-value by output, deadlines, and impossible goals. At 10, Musk taught himself computer programming. At 12, he sold his first video game for a modest sum. It was not the money that mattered, but the proof. Ideas could be converted into reality. Creation offered validation without vulnerability. Machines did not mock you. Code did not betray you. This early success hardened a worldview. Progress is protection. Build fast enough and nothing can hurt you. Yet childhood wounds do not vanish. They evolve. The same intensity that fueled curiosity also bred isolation. Musk struggled with social cues, humor, and emotional nuance. Conversations felt inefficient. Feelings felt like noise. He learned to think in abstractions. First lines of code, later supply chains, propulsion equations, and global risk models. Humanity, to him, was both the beneficiary and the variable most likely to fail. By his late teens, Musk's gaze had already lifted beyond national borders. South Africa felt like a cage. The future lived elsewhere. He emigrated, carrying little more than ambition and a belief bordering on obsession that meaningful work justified any sacrifice. University life brought opportunity, but also restlessness. Formal structures moved too slowly. Authority felt arbitrary. He wanted acceleration, faster learning, faster building, faster impact. This impatience did not come from arrogance alone. It came from fear. Deep down was the same boy who learned that stillness invites pain. Motion, on the other hand, creates distance. If you are always moving forward, nothing can catch you. This psychological engine, equal parts brilliance and trauma, would later power companies that redefine industries while simultaneously eroding the man at their center. The seeds of future conflict were already planted. An intolerance for inefficiency would become legendary. Emotional bluntness would alienate allies. A near-religious belief in mission would excuse exhaustion, broken relationships, and personal neglect. Childhood taught Musk resilience, but it also taught him that suffering is normal, even necessary, on the path to something greater. And so the pattern was set. A boy forged in adversity grew into a man who confuses survival with progress and pressure with purpose. The world would one day praise his audacity. Few would notice that the cost was paid long before the first rocket ever left the ground. Ambition, once awakened, rarely waits for permission. For Elon Musk, the transition from student to builder was not a careful ascent, but a violent acceleration. Universities felt like waiting rooms. Lectures moved at the pace of yesterday. He dropped out not because he lacked discipline, but because his sense of urgency was incompatible with patience. Time to him was the most unforgivable luxury. While others planned careers, Musk planned futures. His earliest ventures were modest in appearance, but radical in intent. The internet, still young and clumsy, felt like raw territory, unclaimed, unfinished, full of structural flaws begging to be optimized. He threw himself into it with the same intensity that once drove him into books. Days blurred into nights. Sleep became optional. Failure was not a warning sign. It was feedback. When his first startup struggled, he did not retreat. He recalibrated. When it sold, the victory did not bring relief. It only confirmed a dangerous belief. Acceleration works. The first true turning point came not with applause, but with risk concentration. Musk poured nearly everything he had into his next ideas, refusing diversification. To outsiders, this looked reckless. To him, it was logical. If extinction was the enemy, whether personal or planetary, then half measures were immoral. He believed focus was not merely a strategy, but a moral stance. Commit fully, or don't begin at all. But success does not scale linearly with effort. As his ventures grew, so did resistance. Established industries pushed back. Regulators slowed momentum. Engineers warned him about timelines that violated physical and human limits. Musk responded the only way he knew how, by pushing harder. Deadlines shortened, expectations sharpened. The pressure inside his organizations intensified until it became part of their identity. Then came the collapse phase, the moment every myth-building story tries to compress into a footnote. One by one, Musk's companies hovered near failure simultaneously. Capital evaporated, launches failed publicly, production lines stalled, critics circled like scavengers. Employees whispered about bankruptcy as a real possibility, not an abstract fear. At one point, Musk was forced to choose which company would receive the last remaining funds, an act less like leadership and more like triage. This was not a heroic montage. This was sustained psychological siege. Musk has described these years as a period of constant dread, where waking up meant absorbing bad news before breakfast and falling asleep meant rehearsing disaster scenarios. Friends faded. Personal life disintegrated under the weight of absence and emotional unavailability. There was no separation between man and mission anymore. Identity fused with outcome. If the company failed, so did he. And yet, this crucible produced transformation. Musk did not abandon the fight. He rewired himself around it. He slept on factory floors to eliminate commute time. He inserted himself into engineering decisions others would delegate. He learned manufacturing through suffering, discovering that vision means nothing if execution collapses under reality. These years carved a reputation that would follow him forever. Impossible standards, ruthless focus, and an expectation that others match his endurance. The turning point was not victory. It was survival. When the tide finally shifted, it did so quietly. A successful launch, a production milestone reached, a contract signed just in time. Each small win stitched the narrative back together, but the scars remained. Musk emerged not softened by hardship, but hardened into something more extreme. From this point forward, he would be seen as a man who bends industries to his will. What was less visible was the internal cost of that transformation. The line between determination and self-destruction had blurred permanently. Stress was no longer an obstacle. It was fuel. Crisis was no longer an exception. It was the default operating condition. The world would later celebrate these moments as proof of genius. But the truth is more unsettling. These turning points did not simply build companies. They locked Musk into a psychological contract with pressure itself. To slow down now would feel like betrayal. To rest would feel like surrender. And so the engine kept running, louder and hotter than ever. From the outside, this was the phase where legends are born. Headlines shifted tone. Skepticism gave way to awe. Rockets that once exploded now returned to Earth like obedient giants, landing upright against all expectations. Electric cars moved from novelty to inevitability, forcing century-old corporations to abandon denial and scramble for survival. Elon Musk's name stopped being associated with risk and started being synonymous with inevitability. Whatever he touched, it seemed, bent the future closer. But success did not arrive as relief. It arrived as amplification. Every victory raised the stakes. Every breakthrough increased the weight on his shoulders. With global attention came global consequences. A delayed launch was no longer a technical issue. It was a geopolitical signal. A missed production target was no longer a factory problem. It was a market shock. Musk's mind became a battlefield where engineering constraints, investor expectations, employee livelihoods, and planetary ambition collided non-stop. During this period, his daily life entered a rhythm that bordered on self-erasure. Weeks passed without days off. Sleep fragmented into short, inefficient intervals. Insomnia was no longer occasional. It was structural. His nervous system never fully powered down. Even moments of triumph were consumed immediately by the next looming crisis. Celebration felt irresponsible. Rest felt dangerous. Public perception, meanwhile, began to fracture. Admirers saw a savior figure, someone willing to suffer so humanity could advance. Critics saw instability, impulsive communication, emotional volatility, and an increasing tendency to bypass filters that traditionally protect powerful figures from themselves. Social media became both megaphone and minefield. A single sentence could erase billions in market value, ignite lawsuits, or provoke regulatory scrutiny. Musk knew this and posted anyway. This paradox defined the era. Unprecedented success paired with escalating personal chaos. Inside his companies, loyalty and fear coexisted. Employees spoke of moments of inspiration so intense they felt historic, followed by nights of exhaustion so severe they bordered on collapse. Musk demanded the impossible, not because he was unaware of limits, but because he believed limits were negotiable. Some rose to meet this pressure and credited him for unlocking their potential. Others burned out, quietly disappearing from the narrative. Tragedy during this phase was rarely cinematic. It was cumulative. Relationships did not end in dramatic explosions. They withered under neglect. Conversations were postponed indefinitely. Emotional presence was sacrificed to operational urgency. Love competed with deadlines, and deadlines always won. Each separation reinforced an internal belief Musk never fully articulated, that closeness is a liability when the mission is this large. And yet, there were moments when the cost became impossible to ignore. Interviews revealed cracks, admissions of loneliness, of overwhelming stress, of nights when the weight of expectation felt unbearable. He spoke about crying from exhaustion, about questioning whether the pain was worth it. These confessions did not slow him down. They merely humanized the damage. Success compounded tragedy in another way. It eliminated excuses. Failure could once be blamed on lack of resources, youth, or inexperience. Now, with global admiration and near unlimited reach, every shortcoming felt personal. If something went wrong, It was no longer because the system was unfair. It was because he hadn't pushed hard enough. This mindset turned success into a trap. The higher he climbed, the less room there was to rest without guilt. At the same time, Musk's ambition expanded beyond companies into ideology. He began speaking not just about products, but about civilization, population collapse, artificial intelligence, free speech, and the fragility of modern society. These concerns were not abstract to him. They were existential. He genuinely believed the world stood on a knife's edge, and that delay could be fatal. This worldview justified everything: exhaustion, broken relationships, personal neglect. Sacrifice became not just necessary, but virtuous. But the human body does not negotiate with ideology. Stress accumulates interest. The nervous system collects debt. Musk's health, physical and psychological, became increasingly fragile. He relied on stimulants to function, medication to sleep, and sheer force of will to bridge the gap in between. This was not balance. It was survival engineering applied inward. Ironically, the very traits that fueled his success intensified his suffering. Hyperfocus erased boundaries. Emotional detachment enabled brutal efficiency, but also isolation. A tolerance for risk allowed innovation, but invited chaos. Musk did not compartmentalize life. He compressed it. Everything mattered all the time. There was no safe zone where pressure did not follow. And yet, the world kept applauding. Each standing ovation made it harder to stop. Each historic milestone reinforced the myth that this pace was sustainable, if not admirable. The tragedy was subtle but profound. Elon Musk became a prisoner of his own success. The future demanded more, always more, and the man delivering it had trained himself never to say no. By this stage, the question was no longer whether Musk could change the world. That was already happening. The question was whether the process would leave anything intact inside him once the applause faded. Because behind every reusable rocket and record-breaking valuation was a quieter reality. A man running faster than exhaustion, chased by a future that never stops asking for sacrifice. Away from factories, launch pads, and boardrooms, Elon Musk's personal life unfolded like a quiet counter-narrative, less visible, more fragile, and far harder to optimize. While the public saw momentum and inevitability, those closest to him often experienced absence. Not intentional cruelty, but a relentless prioritization of mission over presence. Time, once again, was the currency he never had enough of. Romantic relationships entered his life with intensity and optimism, then slowly dissolved under pressure that never lifted. Partners described a man capable of deep curiosity and sharp humor, yet emotionally distant when crises multiplied. Conversations were interrupted by emergencies that could not wait. Promises were postponed by deadlines that felt existential. Over time, affection was forced to compete with urgency, and urgency always won. Fatherhood added another layer of complexity. Musk has spoken about his children with pride and protectiveness, yet also with an undertone of regret. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, that presence cannot be replaced by provision. Wealth cannot compensate for missed moments, but knowing this did not change behavior. The internal logic remained brutal. If the mission fails, everything fails, including the future his children will inherit. Periods of emotional collapse surfaced sporadically, often following extreme professional strain. Musk admitted to bouts of depression so heavy they made basic functioning difficult. Nights passed without sleep, not because of excitement, but because his mind refused to disengage. Anxiety did not announce itself loudly. It hummed constantly in the background, coloring every decision with urgency and fear of delay. Loneliness became a recurring theme. Not the loneliness of isolation, but the loneliness of being surrounded by people while carrying responsibility no one else could fully share. Decisions involving billions, global systems, and existential risk narrowed his circle of true peers to almost none. Vulnerability, already difficult, became strategically dangerous. Weakness could ripple outward with consequences far beyond personal cost. Public scrutiny worsened these pressures. Every emotional fluctuation was analyzed. Every failed relationship became a headline. Mistakes were not processed privately. They were dissected in real time by millions. This exposure hardened defenses. Sarcasm replaced explanation. Humor masked fatigue. The persona grew sharper as the man underneath grew thinner. Yet even within this pattern, glimpses of humanity persisted. Moments when Musk spoke candidly about pain, about feeling overwhelmed, about questioning whether the sacrifice was worth it. These were not attempts at sympathy. They were leaks in a system under strain. Admissions that the cost of progress was not theoretical. It was deeply personal. What makes this chapter tragic is not failure, but imbalance. Musk did not lack love or opportunity. He lacked margin. There was never enough space between crises to heal, to reconnect, to recalibrate. Relationships require slack, room for misunderstanding, rest and repair. His life allowed none. Over time, the accumulation of emotional debt mirrored the operational debt he so often warned others about. Neglected systems fail quietly at first, then suddenly. Musk understood this principle in engineering better than anyone. Applying it to himself proved far more difficult. In the end, his personal life was not destroyed by scandal or betrayal, but by saturation. Too many priorities, too little rest, too much future arriving all at once. And this, perhaps, is the most human part of his story. A man capable of designing solutions for planetary survival, yet still struggling to solve the oldest problem of all: how to be fully present while carrying the weight of the world. Today, Elon Musk exists in a strange equilibrium, neither triumphant nor broken, but perpetually suspended between momentum and exhaustion. His influence is undeniable. His companies continue to shape infrastructure, transportation, communication, and the boundaries of human ambition. Yet the man himself moves through each day with the visible weight of accumulated years of pressure, controversy, and responsibility that never truly dissipates. Publicly, Musk projects resilience. He jokes, he challenges critics, he pushes forward with new visions and accelerated timelines. Privately, however, the cost of decades lived at emergency speed lingers. Sleep remains fragmented. Stress is not an occasional spike, but a baseline condition. The nervous system, trained for crisis, struggles to recognize calm as safe. This is not burnout in the traditional sense. It is adaptation to a life where stopping feels more dangerous than continuing. Financially and materially, Musk has reached a level of security few humans ever will. But security was never the currency he pursued. Meaning was, impact was. Survival of civilization itself became the framing through which he justified relentless sacrifice. In this worldview, rest appears indulgent, boundaries appear irresponsible, and personal well-being becomes negotiable. Yet time introduces a subtle shift. The urgency remains, but it is now accompanied by reflection. Musk speaks more often about the limits of human endurance, about the importance of making life multi-planetary, not just for achievement, but for preservation. There is an emerging awareness, perhaps too late, perhaps just in time, that even the strongest systems fail if maintenance is deferred indefinitely. The message of his story is not simple inspiration, nor easy condemnation. It is a warning wrapped in achievement. Elon Musk proves that one person can bend industries, alter trajectories, and accelerate the future by sheer force of will. He also proves that the human body and mind are not infinite resources. Progress extracts payment, and it does not accept excuses or defer invoices. Behind the applause, behind the innovation, behind the mythology, stands a man who paid in sleep, in relationships, in psychological safety. The tragedy is not that he struggled, but that struggle became normalized, even celebrated, as the price of greatness. And so the final question lingers, not just for Musk, but for anyone chasing outsized impact. If building the future requires destroying the present self, is the trade truly sustainable? Can humanity advance without demanding that its visionaries bleed continuously for progress? Elon Musk's life offers no easy answers, only a mirror, one that reflects our collective hunger for acceleration and asks whether we are willing to accept the hidden cost.